All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this now fourth part of our four-part series on stored procedures and functions. So for this episode, we are now going to be focusing on the stored functions. We're going to be looking at some syntax and obviously some real-world examples. All right? So let's go on to the PowerPoint slide again and go to the next slide. So this is now, we've switched from creating procedures and now let's create a stored function. So a lot of the stuff that you have just learned can be applied to functions, okay? So I'm not going to go over all the different examples of functions with all the different examples that we just looked at, okay? Instead, I'm just going to show you the main difference between the two, and you can just apply the exact same knowledge that you've just learned into an actual function itself. So this one, again, I'm doing the drop if exists, but here I'm not saying drop procedure, I'm saying drop function. So it's very important to understand that we need to decipher between them using the proper syntax. So even though this is not highlighted in blue, it looks like it's not a keyword, it actually is a keyword. I'm not sure why it's not highlighted in blue. That kind of threw me for a loop, but in any case, it works. So we're going to say drop function if exists, and this is the get squared value function. So I'm sort of doing the exact same thing as we did before with the in-out example, but I'm showing you in such a way that it's a little bit simpler because it could just be created as a function. Because if you think about it, anytime you are using a procedure that uses one and only one out parameter, then you probably want to use a function just because it's a little bit easier in terms of syntax. Okay, if you have a procedure that uses more than one out procedure or out parameter, then you're stuck with using a procedure using multiple out parameters. Hopefully that makes sense to you. But like I said, if you only have one out parameter, then you might as well use a function because the whole purpose of a function is to return a value to you. So how does it work? Well, it works very similar to procedures. We say create function instead of create procedure. We have the name of the function, and we'd have the actual parameters that we're passing into the function. The only thing to mention here, like I said at the very beginning of this tutorial, was that the what are they called? Parameters are a little bit different here. The functions only accept in parameters. Okay, and that sort of makes sense because the whole point of a function is to return something. So functions don't allow you to pass in out parameters because that sort of would negate the whole purpose of the function if you could also pass in out parameters. That would be a little bit odd. So you cannot pass in out functions, which means you cannot pass in, out parameters, which means you cannot pass in an in-out or an out. All you can do is pass in an in parameter, which means that you don't really need to specify that it's an in parameter because it already knows it's going to be an in parameter. So that's why we don't have the keyword in front of the value that we're passing in. The value being the name of the parameter and int being the data type of the parameter. Whew. So the only other difference is you also need to specify what data type this particular function will be returning. So you say create function, give it the name and the parameter list, and say returns, and then whatever data type it should return. In this case, it's just going to be an int, so I put int. If it was a double or a float or a varchar, I would replace that with whatever the data type is of the data that is being returned by the function. And then everything else is business as usual, except for we use the keyword return when we are done and ready to return a particular value from our function. Now, again, you can apply any of the exact same things that you've learned inside of the procedures, also inside of the functions. So this is just one line of code, but this could have been many lines of code. You can have select statements going on, you can have if statements, you can have loops and all that stuff, and at the very end, then you would have the return keyword with whatever it is that you are returning. The most important thing is that the function must return something. So at some point, it must return a value. I believe otherwise you get some sort of a compilation error, or maybe it's a runtime error. I cannot remember how it works with databases. But in any case, it must return something. And this is how we specify it to return something. We use the return keyword. You'll notice that we did not use the return keyword at all inside of any of our stored procedures because the return keyword is reserved for functions. Cool? So I think that's pretty much it for the presentation. I will go and show you exactly what this function looks like because obviously you are probably curious. I'm going to copy that functionality from here. like so, copy, and go over to my, whatchamacallit here, paste. So, okay, we have our function. I'm going to run this to make sure it executes successfully, and it does. So now how do we actually make use of our function? Well, the difference is we don't use the call keyword. Call is specific for the procedures. We do not use call. For functions, you typically use the select, because you can use a function inside of a select statement, which is kind of cool. So you can say select get squared value function and pass in the value that you want to square. So in this case, it's 8 because that's, well, I just want to square the value of 8. And then I can run this, and there you go. You see it returns get squared value as 64. So in comparison to the out parameters, you remember the out parameters, we had to declare a variable, we had to declare value as 8, and then we needed to do a select value in order to get the result. But with the function, we don't have to do that. We don't have to do this or this. All we do is we just say select get squared value and run it, and we get our result. So there's less code to write. We can switch it to a 9 just to show you that it's actually working properly, or 1589 where we get that bigger number as well. But just to show you, that's how a function works. Now, what's interesting is I haven't tested this out. I might be shooting myself in the foot by doing this, but I just want to see if I can do something like this. Get transaction ID and this function from transactions. Let's say where amount is greater than 1,000. So I'm not sure if this is going to work. Let me just run it first. Okay, so there you go. Just to show you that it's quite flexible with using functions. If I were to just get rid of this, okay, if I just say select transaction ID from transactions where amount is greater than 1,000, you see that it returns a transaction ID of 3. But you see that I can also append the actual function inside of this select statement. Even though this function has nothing to do with this select statement as a whole, you can still plop it in there if you like. Okay, and I can run it, and sure enough, you also get the value of the squared function, or the squared number that we passed in. So this has applications that are quite vast, that go far beyond what I've shown you right now. You can have functions that do a whole lot. I wonder if even I could get so bold as to do this as well. Again, I haven't tested this out, and I probably should have, but let's just say where amount is greater than get square value of, let's say 10, or no, 100. What's 100 squared? 1,000, or is it 10,000? I think it's 10,000. Isn't that bad? Yes, it's 10,000. Okay, so it doesn't allow me to do that. I thought maybe we could use this as a inside of the where clause, but I guess you cannot do that. So my apologies. I tried. So again, oh, maybe you can. Hold on a second. See, this is now I'm just sort of getting off topic, and 100. Why did that one work? Squared value of 10. Actually, let me run that, and I'm getting transaction IDs. So let me stop this, and let me say also amount, so I can actually see what the amounts are that are coming back from this where clause. So sure enough, it does seem like it is working. That's interesting. So I'm getting the squared value of 10, which is being returned as 10 times 10, which is 100. And then I'm using that number inside of the where clause. And sure enough, it's returning all the transactions with amounts greater than the square root, or the square of 10, which of course is 100. So it seems like it's working. So how come, let me stop. I just stopped the transaction. Let me put in 100. How come that one didn't work? Let me run this again. And it looks like it is running. It's going in 6 seconds, 8 seconds long, 9 seconds. So I thought I'd seen an error, but maybe I didn't see an error. Maybe it was just pulling up the previous result screen, and maybe I just didn't realize it was, an old message. So I'm just going to let this run, and I would assume that this is going to work because, like you just saw, it worked with the square value, square value of 10, and it worked fine. So now it's going to try to find transactions that are greater than 10,000, which I don't believe we have any that are greater than 10,000. So it should really return nothing. But obviously, we'll see what it does. I'll let it run, and in any case, I'll come back to this because I don't want to waste your time. But you can see how flexible the use of functions really are. You can use them in your where, you can clause, you can use them in your select clauses as well. Very, very flexible stuff. So almost limitless what you can use with functions. Let's go back to our slides. And this is sort of the last slide, I believe. Let me just make sure. Yes, this is the last slide where I just sort of give you a very quick overview of how you would actually use a stored procedure versus a stored function. Again, the stored procedures use the call keyword, whereas the actual stored functions are used with in tandem with probably a select statement. But as you can see as well, as you just saw, you don't have to put it in the side of the select itself. You can actually put it inside of the where clause, and I'm sure a bunch of other places. I invite you to experiment, just like I've been doing, to see what the heck happens, right? Because you don't know unless you try it out. So in this case, what happened was it's just a timeout. So it timed out because apparently it just took too long to figure out the result of that transaction, or that operation. But in any case, you see that it does work. We can indeed use the function inside of a where clause. So there, hopefully you guys have learned a lot in this little bonus video. I had a lot of fun learning about all the different intricacies of functions versus procedures, and hopefully you had a lot of fun learning, and there you go. So have a great one. Hopefully you can take this knowledge and apply it right away if you are integrating an application, or rather a database, into your application, because like I said, there are some major speed benefits to using stored procedures and functions in terms of reducing the back and forth between your application and your database server. If you can really minimize those trips, you can save a lot of CPU cycles and a lot of time. So enjoy, all the best, and as always, happy learning. Bye for now.